Some historic homes leave a lasting impression, places that don't just reveal the past, but make you feel it as you move through them. Managed today by the National Park Service, Melrose is recognized as one of the greatest historic houses of the American South. Never altered after the war, and retaining much of its original 19th century furnishings, it remains one of the most intact pre-Civil War estates, still standing today. It represents a piece of America's preserved past, one that shows multiple sides, the beauty revealed within the interiors, the history of the land and the architecture, and the harsh reality of an enslaved economy that made it all possible. Today, we're back in Natchez, Mississippi, stepping inside Melrose to explore the significance of this home, the people who lived here, soaking in all of the design inspiration held within its walls, and to better understand the complex history it preserves. Hi, I'm Allie, and welcome back to Fab Little Dish, where we celebrate the love for vintage home. If you love historic house tours and the stories that keep them alive, give this video a big thumbs up, and make sure to subscribe for weekly house tours. Now let's head back to Natchez, Mississippi. John McMurrin came to Natchez in the 1820s from McConnellsburg, Pennsylvania, arriving just as Mississippi was becoming a state. He grew up in an area where slavery had already been outlawed, so moving to the Deep South was a calculated decision on his part. Natchez offered opportunity, influence, and wealth, all built on a system that depended on enslaved labor. McMurrin successfully established himself as an attorney, and in 1831 he married Mary Louisa Turner, the daughter of a local judge. Her parents gave them a 645-acre plantation and 24 enslaved people. He became very successful as a cotton planter, owning all or part of 5 plantations, including nearly 10,000 acres of land and over 300 enslaved individuals. In 1841, John McMurrin and his wife Mary Louisa purchased about 130 acres of land just outside of Natchez, property that was described at the time as a worn-out cotton field. Construction on the McMurrin home began in 1845. When it was completed, a local newspaper praised it as one of the finest homes in Mississippi. They named the estate Melrose, after Melrose Abbey in Scotland, a place where they had visited during their travels in Europe. The family had a prosperous next couple of decades, where they enjoyed a high-class lifestyle and the grandest of Southern luxury here. A life made possible by dozens of enslaved individuals who maintained the house and the grounds constantly. But that world for the McMurrins would suddenly come to a screeching halt. The end of the McMurrin story actually becomes very sad. Like most wealthy families who lived in Natchez, the McMurrins were Unionists who did not support Mississippi's secession from the United States in 1861. But their fortunes did turn as the Civil War began. Their son and their son-in-law enlisted in the Confederate Army. Their daughter Mary Elizabeth, who once had held her joyous and glamorous wedding here, died at just 28 years old, along with 2 of her 3 children. The McMurrins also lose 2 of their other grandchildren during this time to illnesses, more than likely yellow fever. The family was devastated by the deaths of their daughter, Mary Elizabeth, and their 4 grandchildren during the war. As a slave-based economy of the South collapsed, so did the McMurrins' fortunes. Federal troops arrived at Melrose during the war, and because McMurrin was a northern-based Unionist, he took an oath of allegiance. He had cotton that he had stored, and this allowed him to sell that on the open market late in the war. This significantly helped him recover financially, where he then reinvested in northern industries like railroads and mining. But personal loss overshadowed any regained wealth. After the war, the McMurrins sold Melrose, planning to move north closer to their surviving son. Right as they were getting ready to leave for their journey up north, John McMurrin boarded a steamboat to settle some last-minute business affairs before the journey. And the steamboat exploded near Baton Rouge. He was pulled from the river alive, but very badly injured. He was taken to New Orleans, but due to his internal injuries that nobody was aware of at the time, he died just moments before Mary Louisa could reach his bedside. Instead of continuing north, she returned to live with her parents at Woodlands, which was right down the road. She remained here until her death decades later. In her letters, she wrote of sitting at Woodlands, looking across the road down toward Melrose, the masterpiece that her and her husband created, a world that once was, where she wrote, a place where they had such high hopes and expectations. So originally, John McMurrin left a life in pursuit of a success that could only be made possible at the time by enslaved labor. And though he gained the wealth he was seeking, and he recovered it, he did not escape loss or a tragic end himself. And his wife was left with a constant reminder of what once was, living out her remaining years in quiet solitude, staring out at an old life that would never be again. Melrose was only able to function through the daily labor of enslaved people. By 1861, the McMurrins enslaved at least 25 men, women, and children right here at Melrose. And yet, we know very little about who they were as individuals, where they came from, what they hoped for. Their stories and voices were largely unrecorded, and that absence in itself speaks volumes about how enslaved lives were viewed at the time. Those who worked inside the house lived in rooms above the kitchen and the service buildings that surrounded the estate, positioned close to the labor where they were expected to perform. Completed in the Greek Revival style, the home reflects a design language that dominated American architecture in the decades leading up to the Civil War. This style emphasized symmetry, proportion, and permanence. The style was adapted for the climate. Tall ceilings, deep porches, and large doors and windows allowed for airflow in the heat and humidity of the Mississippi summers. The house spans roughly 16,000 square feet and is constructed almost entirely of brick. Brickwork so refined that it was once considered the finest in all of Mississippi. Even today, much of it remains untouched and in its original condition, which is remarkable. And what we think is stone here is in fact an illusion. The massive Doric columns across the front are made of brick, then covered in stucco and carefully painted to resemble marble. All throughout the exterior of the house, whatever we think is marble has actually been painted to look like marble. This faux stone finish was all the rage at the time, and if you look closely, traces of the original painter's brushwork here from the 1840s, which is amazing. We see an illusion here with the front doors as well. They're crafted from local cypress, not oak, and painted to mimic more expensive looking hardwood. In fact, nearly every surface of this house is cypress, chosen for its resistance to insects and rot. It was an ideal material for the southern climate. Those massive cypress trees were logged from the Louisiana swamps and milled locally. Skilled craftsmen, including trained carpenters, many of whom were enslaved, transformed that raw material into one of the most refined homes of its era. The landscape was designed in the English country style, inspired by the great estates the McMurrins admired during their travels in Europe. Many of the magnolia trees still standing today were planted by the family themselves, living pieces of the McMurrins still present at Melrose. The front doors are cypress, like almost everything here, and they're painted to look like oak. That's something you'll see throughout the house. Expensive finishes created through craftsmanship and illusion, rather than through imported materials. This central hall was designed to make an impression. The house is nearly 16,000 square feet, and you can feel that scale right away. Tall ceilings, even proportions, and a sense of formality meant to set the tone as soon as guests stepped inside. This is the drawing room, a formal space used to welcome and receive guests at Melrose, one that was meant to impress, and it sure does in all of its mid-19th century southern splendor. This feels like a backdrop from Gone with the Wind, and these colors actually were all the rage at the time. One of the most remarkable things about Melrose is how much of it remains intact. Unlike many of the homes during this time, where the items were either looted or sold off during and after the war, Melrose holds a significant amount of its original 19th century furnishings. and a lot of it is right here in the parlor. Much of the furniture here was purchased from Philadelphia, which makes sense. At the time, Philadelphia was a major center for the finest of furniture that you could buy in America. This room would have been used for formal entertaining, conversation, and important family occasions. The largest celebration the McMurrins ever hosted here was their daughter's wedding in 1856. You can almost feel that celebration here. Everyone gathered here, sharing a happy moment that would soon be followed by so much heartache. The floor is a reproduction of the original floor cloth that was installed here in 1848. Floor cloths were common in the mid-19th century, practical, durable, and decorative. There's a small section of that original floor cloth right here. They were made from stretched canvas, hand-painted to imitate marble, then sealed with shellac. The cloth would then be rolled out, cut directly to fit the room, and installed in place. The dining room also has most of its original furniture from Philadelphia, and we can really get an idea of how this place might have functioned on the day-to-day. Above the table, we see a punka, a fan that was used. This was operated by a pulley system, where typically an enslaved boy would have been stationed nearby, pulling a rope back and forth constantly to keep air moving throughout the room during meals. It's a small detail, but it speaks volumes about the realities behind formal dining in houses like this. It always stands out to me in each of the southern homes we see one in. They were sadly very common. The table is set with hundreds of original pieces of Mrs. McMurrin's English china. Massive pocket doors, again made of cypress and painted to look like oak, separate a single massive space into 3 different rooms. This is the parlor, a more comfortable, everyday sitting room where the family would have spent a lot of time together. This is where they would have held conversation, read, and entertained close friends. Unlike the drawing room, this space was meant to feel quieter and more lived in. The furnishings here reflect that difference. While still elegant, this room is more restrained, designed for conversation rather than display. It's the kind of space where evenings were spent talking, reading aloud, or gathering as a family away from the formality of the Natchez social scene. And this is the library, Mr. McMurrin's private space for reading, writing, and conducting business. And later in the evening, a space where the men would gather after dinner. It's very formal in here, restrained, and quite masculine in tone. Upstairs, the entire upstairs floor plan mirrors exactly the floor plan down below. The same sense of balance carries through, but the atmosphere changes. This level is more private. During the day, the shutters upstairs were often kept closed to protect the interiors from the harsh Mississippi heat and sun. There are 4 bedrooms upstairs. This is the master bedroom where Mr. and Mrs. McMurrin slept, very restrained in style and practical. We see day beds in front of the larger beds in the bedrooms because those were easier to plop onto for an afternoon nap, without getting the bigger bed messy. The children's room offers a quieter contrast to the formality of the rest of the home we've been seeing. We see period-appropriate toys scattered throughout, as if the children just stepped away. The space feels very light and lived in. This was more than likely John McMurrin Jr.'s wife's bedroom while she stayed here at Melrose with her in-laws during the Civil War. We see a mosquito net here, which would have been critical during hot, sticky nights in the South. During the mid-19th century, yellow fever was extremely common, and these helped protect you as you slept. One of the most personal pieces in this room is the sewing table right here. It was donated by some of the McMurrin descendants. In a surviving letter, John McMurrin Jr.'s wife wrote about sitting at her Chinese sewing table on the day Natchez was shelled by federal troops in 1862. She describes being here, sitting right here, sewing, while hearing cannon fire in the distance, a moment where war suddenly collided with everyday life inside this house. It's one of those pieces that just holds so much history, you can feel it. This guest room belonged to the McMurrin's daughter, Mary Elizabeth, before she died. It was larger to accommodate her and her children, who also had a very sad fate. All but one died, along with their mother right here, more than likely due to yellow fever. The room is covered in a French-style wallpaper pattern that was very popular in the South during the time. Made to imitate silk drapery, it allows for a cozy yet elegant look. The furniture in here is original to the McMurrin family and are lovely examples of fine mid-19th century craftsmanship. This room reflects an early move towards indoor bathing, something still uncommon in mid-19th century homes. Facilities like this would have been simple by modern standards, but they represent changing ideas about hygiene, comfort, and privacy. Even here, convenience very much depended entirely on enslaved labor. Water had to be carried, heated, emptied, and cleaned, which was a tedious and sometimes dangerous task. I also want to share something with you all that I've been working on for a while. I don't know if you feel this way too, but I'm always a little disappointed when I leave historic house museum gift shops. I always want to take something back home with me that'll remind me of the house that I just learned so much about. So I decided to create my own. This is the official launch of my initial historic house tour souvenir collection, pieces inspired by the homes that we tour together on this channel. Each design is meant to feel personal and reflective of each space that we walk into. Right now the collection includes fab little dishes, which you can actually hang up, and they're so adorable. I plan on making one for each of the houses that we've toured on this channel, so make sure to collect them all. And I have these exclusive tea towels, which are just so adorable. There's more coming soon, but I wanted to share this first launch with you right here, right now. If you want to find the best way to support Fab Little Dish and continue these historic house tour journeys that we are on together each week, then feel free to head to fablittledish.shop and pick yourself out a tea towel and a Fab Little Dish. Now back to Melrose. This building supported some of the most demanding labor on the entire estate. The first floor was used for dairy processing and all of the home's laundry, two tasks that were constant, exhausting, and often dangerous. Laundry days required heating large iron pots of water over open flames, hauling and dumping that water into wash tubs, scrubbing heavy linens by hand, wringing them out, repeating the process over and over, and then ironing everything once dry, only to do everything all over again. It just sounds grueling. It's difficult to imagine the physical toll of that work, especially when it was done so regularly and so constantly for a household, especially of this size. Melrose also maintained a small herd of dairy cows to provide fresh milk and butter for the household. Those products were stored and processed right here. Built-in storage compartments right here below functioned as early refrigeration, packed with blocks of ice to keep the food from spoiling. Upstairs, the rooms housed enslaved servants. Their close proximity here mattered. They needed to be right here, close enough, ready to respond immediately when bells rang from within the main house, day or night. This building, more than almost any other one, it makes it clear how much unseen labor was required to sustain the elegance of places like Melrose. And just outside the main house is the original outdoor privy. Despite that indoor bathing space we just saw, privies like this remained essential well into the late 19th century. Its survival here adds an important layer of realism, reminding us that daily life at Melrose relied on systems far less comfortable than the house's grand facade suggests. And here is the inside of one of the cabins of the Enslaved. They have an exhibit here which I used a lot of my research for in this video, and it also gives you an idea of how small these living spaces are compared to what we just saw inside. There's a weight to Melrose, one that stays with you long after you leave, and maybe that's exactly how places like this are meant to make us feel. A realistic and unfiltered awareness of the beauty, the ambition, and the cost that made places like these all possible. I hope you enjoyed this tour of Melrose in Natchez, Mississippi. Make sure to give this video a big thumbs up, and if you'd like to support Fab Little Dish so I can continue to bring you these amazing historic house tours and the stories that come along with them, then please visit fablittledish.shop and pick up some of the new house tour souvenirs that I've just launched. Until the next one, my friends, keep enjoying the beauty of vintage home. Au revoir.